Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for the introduction. Today we'll be discussing the importance of a considered approach to specifying materials, examining factors from sustainability to personal values. I've got an amazing panel here with me today, and to begin with, I'd love if you could introduce yourself, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Oyuna Serendor, and I'm a creative director and designer of Oyuna, a brand I established 20 years ago, and I am from Mongolia, and we specialize in designer cashmere, sustainable cashmere.
Hi everyone, I'm Lucy Bagshaw, I'm from TP Bennett. We're a 350-person design consultancy working across architecture, interiors, planning, and workplace strategy. I'm in both the interiors and sustainability team, so I'm very passionate about this subject and happy to be here. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Daphne McMahon. I'm the sales director at Morgan Furniture. We are a family-run designer and manufacturer of furniture, and we've been going for 30 years this year.
Yeah. Did you? No?
Hi everyone, my name is Nicole Meyer. I'm the director of brand here at Ultrafabrics. We create premium polyurethane materials for upholstery and furniture and interiors, as well as automotive, aviation, about 12 different global industries. In my role, I work with content and our customer partnerships, but also work really closely with our sustainability strategy for the last 3 years.
Thank you very much. So to start off with, obviously in the last 2 years, we've seen a huge shift in the way we work, in the way we shop, live. Our spaces have really changed, and I think a lot of businesses have put their focus on sustainability. For my first question, I've got two. What is Ultrafabrics, and what are designers and architects doing to meet these new requirements?
Around sustainability, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So sustainability is actually one of our pillars as a brand. You know, we've always been animal free. We've never used toxic products. But lately we've really focused in on some key areas where we've created some measurable time-bound targets around material innovation. So we're looking to add in new resources from renewable or recycled origin, conserving and reusing resources where possible. And we're also looking at our manufacturing impacts, so how we can improve our water footprint, how we can minimize our waste and eventually, you know, eliminate it.
Would you like to elaborate a little bit about designers and architects and their approach to meeting these new requirements as well? Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think everything that you're doing here is really resonating with us in the interiors division. We're no longer looking at materials just from an aesthetic perspective or even just a performance perspective, but we're looking at it really from sustainability and from how materials are going to be affecting people, and you know, from social perspective as well as the environmental perspective. So yes, it's completely in tandem with where we're going as well and the journey we're on.
I wasn't sure if you wanted to elaborate.
Well, speaking not as a designer, but from our perspective as a manufacturer in dealing with designers and architects now, we've definitely seen a shift. And it's been interesting for us because it's sort of in our DNA at Morgan that we have been thinking about sustainable practices since we began. So it's nice now that the sort of designers, the end client, the end user, they're all now thinking about that as well, and that's sort of one of the first things that comes up in conversation, which is fantastic. So that kind of sense of urgency means that throughout sort of all of us here and all the different companies, it's become one of the priority areas to look at if it wasn't one before.
And how can designers and architects and businesses achieve a holistic approach to material selection?
Well, I didn't have a turn yet. So I think these days design cannot exist on its own, like politics cannot exist without climate policy. So there was a question about how different it is to design with, for example, leather versus ultra fabrics. To be honest, from my point of view, there isn't much difference, because as a designer you can design pretty much everything from whatever you're given. You give 1,000 matchsticks, you can create something. But as I said, design cannot exist on its own anymore. So therefore, it's so important, the source, the material, the integrity behind material, how is it made, who has made it. So these are the things becoming number one criteria when we're designing these days. We've, of course, we've been working with natural, sustainably sourced cashmere since day one, working with our nomads quite closely. So it's really important to, it's great to see this huge shift in the market, especially since the pandemic. People are more conscious, and it's great to be really being part of the whole sustainability journey.
I think what I'd add to that is certainly off the back of what you were saying about the pandemic is how people have really started to acknowledge how people need to be the centre of design, and it's people-centric design is becoming more and more important, and that can go, with how we specify materials for people's well-being, for the way that they feel, for the way that they work best. We can do a lot of workplace design, so that's coming into it a lot, is creating this variety of spaces so that people can really maximise their potential and work to their very best. But also the people that manufacture the products as well is becoming really high on the priority list. It's no longer good enough just to supply a environmentally friendly product that's using renewable resources and recycled content, but we also need to know that they're made by people with fair supply chains that are being paid a fair wage and living in fair working conditions and things like that. So that's something that we're definitely moving towards as well in the interiors industry.
And do you think that has been accelerated by the pandemic, or do you think it was already happening before?
I think certainly the variety, the understanding of people has gone up a mile. I think before everyone was very much prescribed the way that they were supposed to work, and workplaces were quite consistent. There was already a move towards providing a variety of spaces and focus spaces and things like that. But now with flexible working, hybrid working, I think people need to know how to draw and attract people back to the office and acknowledge that, even if you're an introvert, you may still want to work in a very different way to the introvert that you sit next to. It's not a one size fits all anymore. They need to kind of adapt and provide variety, and I think materials is a really important tool in achieving that.
And I think a lot of people are also more interested now in kind of what, not only obviously, for example, in what we eat, there has been a real interest in kind of the ingredients and where that's sourced and from, but also now in our buildings and interiors, and I think that demand is only going to continue to grow. As a business architect or designer, how would you define and approach sustainability?
Sure, I'll go with that one. So I won't go into the in-depth explanation, but it really comes down to three keywords probably that we focus on, which is reduce, reuse, and recycle. So in everything we do, and as I mentioned that we've been doing this for the last 30 years since we started, it's all about every element of the process. So in reducing, it's looking at how can you reduce the time it takes to produce a product, how do you reduce the energy required to make that product, the water, etc. And that starts in the design process as well as the production process for us. So it's sort of an all-round, sort of encompassing loop, if you like. And then reusing is then looking at, stating the obvious, but looking at, well, if there's any waste out of that product, how can we reuse that waste? Is there a useful use of that waste? Could we think about reducing that waste as well? So then it goes full circle back to the start. So it's sort of this never-ending loop, and anything that we can't reuse is then recycled. And that then drives, well, let's look at that material. If that material can't be recycled in the best way that we think it could be, could we then look at the materials? So then that goes all the way back again to the start of the design process. So it is this continuous loop for us. So that's how we would define it. It's never ending. It's a continuous improvement. And it's always looking for those small marginal gains that really make a big impact at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, we really believe that there's balance, or there's beauty in balance. And so when we're creating something sustainable, we don't really ever want to sacrifice comfort or performance, because that's really important to us and like the final use of that. So our goal is to create materials that are, you know, responsibly made, but still conserving resources, thinking about well-being. And I think it's important, like our approach to that is about collaboration, like we were saying. I think learning from each other, learning from our customers, you know, willing to be flexible, because we are an ingredient brand, and so we're trying to fulfill their vision. So it's like learning along the way, and being honest. I think honesty is really important, just because sustainability has become such a catch-all of a word that everyone has a different approach to it, and so it's figuring out, you know, what is your goal, how can we support that, and how can we help you honestly and transparently as possible.
Maybe I totally agree with all of that. I would add also another point that is quite challenging as makers, designers. The main question is, why are we making more product? Why are we bringing more product into this world? So I think that is the most challenging question we should all address, and we really should aim, and we also in the learning process, we should really find a way to really create less, but whatever less we create, that is the most amazing quality, this amazing story and depth, and people cherish that product or service for years to come. And that is the biggest challenge, to reduce. We talk about interiors. People have so much stuff in their homes. It's like, you know, we should really, you know, aim to have this beautiful, clean space where we can actually, you know, live and breathe, and we should be going out in nature and swimming in cold water. You know, this kind of approach is so important, having very few garments, but the garments that you cherish, cashmere pullover, that you hand over from generation to generation. Because from my point of view, people say, why do you create more cashmere products? But absolute sustainability can only be achieved if there is no humans on this planet. But we can't eradicate everyone. I think everyone agrees with that. And I think everyone needs to own their own sustainability, whatever industry we are. So as a designer, a cashmere fashion and interior products designer, I am working with Mongolian nomads, and I can't tell them, you cannot, you know, you should stop rearing your goats. That cashmere is one of the main income for them, and I do need to. I really want to support that, but support them in such a way so that cashmere desertification is prevented or not happening or stopped, so that we preserve the land for generations to come. But quality of the cashmere needs to be higher. Quantity should be less, but quality should be higher. So I would add that, which is most challenging thing, to reduce what we create more and more.
I think that's really fascinating, and definitely resonates with me. We're obviously in an industry in the interiors where we're constantly being asked to create more interiors and bring in new things, and whilst clients' perspectives are starting to change a bit, it is a challenge to kind of acknowledge that actually we do have too much stuff, there's too much in the world, and how can we work with that ethos of reducing but also supporting those economies. Because if we were to suddenly, you know, there's a lot of talk about, oh, let's just specify local and just procure locally. Well, yes, there's a lot of merit to that, but there's also a lot of danger with that, because we could be cutting off, you know, suppliers that actually rely on our, you know, procurement of them, that's supporting local economies and you know, and people in areas where they might not have, you know, as many people purchasing their items. You know, I'm sure people in Mongolia don't buy a lot of kind of cashmere every day. So, well, do they? Oh, right, okay. Well, there we go. I'm wrong about that. But okay. That makes sense. But it is something that we have to balance, that we can't just say, right, we're not going to buy anything new, because you know, a lot of economies and businesses are relying on us. So it's a real kind of double-edged sword, really, I think.
So maybe having a more holistic approach rather than just focusing on the one thing.
Yeah, and for me, I think it will be really interesting to see in the next couple of years how businesses are starting to change their business models for the take-back schemes and renewal of their own products and perhaps other people's products. It might be something you're kind of looking at, and really seeing how we can adapt with that and reuse what our clients have, what we have, and see how that develops and moves forward.
Which actually leads me to the next question, how you would, or if you can share what your design values are and how you've been working with those values. It's a big question.
Design values, okay.
And how that perhaps affects material selection.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess going back to our goal of adding more renewable and recycled resources, we've actually set a goal for our whole portfolio to contain at least 50% of those by 2030. And I think what's really great is we've really clearly defined those types of resources and what we're looking for. So, within this area of rapidly renewable, we're looking for things that are coming from forestry or agricultural resources that have strong traceability. So, we work with a brand called Tencel. They're really big in like the home furnishing space, and they make a modal fiber that is renewably sourced. It's coming from beechwood forest. They have a really great closed loop system and approach to their sustainability. So I think it's finding strong partners that could work with us and have the same commitments that we do. And then in the area of recycled, where that's coming down the road, but we're looking for things that are, post-consumer and can really kind of help us all achieve like circularity, together. So I think it's just about finding like strong partners and kind of going back to that, what can we do to make some small changes? Because at the end of the day, we're still a polyurethane material. So there's only that so much that we could do that's available, that's viable, that can be used for upholstery. So it's just making those small tweaks as best as we can.
It was interesting for me to work with Volar Bio of Ultrafabrics, which is 27% bio, 29%. So, of course, one of my friends asked, but it's at the end of the day, 70-something% is plastic. And I said, yes, it's true, but I think as in sustainability journey, we should be so supportive of each other, not pointing fingers, and also really inspiring each other instead of putting people off and just start saying, oh, you're not doing this, but oh, what you doing this is great, and then supporting each other that will drive more change. Maybe next year I will work with Volar Bio version 2, which is 60% Volar Bio. So I think that I would add that's quite important.
I think for me, the design values goes back to something I mentioned right at the beginning, and that's what we're doing as designers, and that's designing things for people. And I think materials have just a really leading role in how we can make people feel, how we can make people act, perform better, and they really just have a lot of power. That's I've kind of said it already, but that's what my value would be.
I think what Una was saying really interesting, would completely agree. We have our core set of design values internally within our own design team, and that involves sort of looking at new product development, and the brief being, okay, we want that to take 20% less time to manufacture. How do we do that, or use 30% less material? But then, as you've all been saying, you should use people's expertise out there in the industry as well. So we believe that partnering and collaborations are key to some of the best design innovations and collections that we've come up with. And I'm speaking as the sales director, so obviously I use we in a very broad term. It wasn't me at all. But there was a collaboration we did, I think now 7 or 8 years ago, with an architect who specialised in using 3D printing technologies. And this was back when it was, it's been developing year on year, but it was back when it was still relatively new, and there was nothing in contract furniture that was commercially viable that was 3D printed. So we saw this as an opportunity and developed a chair and a table with this architect. And it was creating a 3D printed element which uses a form of a plastic, a polyamide. But interestingly, plastic is actually the second, after wood, the second in the ranking of sort of having the least negative impact on the environment. Obviously not talking about bottles in the oceans, killing fish, just to clarify. But in terms of the energy that goes into producing that material. So we looked at this 3D printing process, and actually you have no waste because the laser binds together this plastic and forms a piece that is then fully recyclable. You can then almost sort of melt that back down and then reuse it. So that piece of plastic should hopefully never end up, in landfill or in the ocean. So that's also interesting. And we would have never, we're so ingrained now to think plastic is terrible. And there are certain plastics that are, don't get me wrong, but learning from other people's expertise really opened our eyes as to, well, actually we can develop a product that in a way helps because we can use some waste material there and form something new. So.
We talk about recycled plastic, and somebody produces something plastic, and then someone else creates another product. I think I'm not against recycled plastic, but I think what if plastic created goes back to the original product again? Then there is no need to creating another type of product. You know what I mean? Instead of recycling, in order to create more products, it needs to, let's say if you create let's say Ultrafabrics, they recycle it, can you reuse them
So our material...
It's actually my next question, if you can give a few examples, about the bio-based material.
Yeah, so our material, how it is currently, can't go back to the raw ingredients to be recycled now, but that's where the Volar Bio product kind of comes in, with us introducing biopolymers, with us introducing more renewable and recycled resources in the backing to kind of get us closer to a point where we could kind of strip it down to the original materials, if I'm understanding the question correctly. Which I think I am, hopefully. But yeah, I think that's what makes Volar Bio, so exciting, because we kind of took this corn byproduct resin, we blended it with our standard resins to reduce our dependence on those finite resources, to find a better solution. But still, going back to that idea of not sacrificing what our original intent is, which is primarily, high performance upholstery. That's where we work, and things need to be cleaned, and even more now than ever. So we always kind of keep that in mind.
And can you share what some of the benefits are of using bio-based materials in terms of durability? A lot of them are lightweight. Can you share how that impacts in your different industries, so in interiors and maybe specifying a piece of furniture? Could you elaborate a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, the durability for us is the same, and that was really, really important to us. We spent actually 4 years of development of that product to find the right supplier, to invest in that, to kind of learn along the way. And this is going back to 2015, where there really wasn't a demand for bio-based performance fabrics. In some cases, there's still not. So we're a little ahead of the game in trying to bring our customer along on the journey and explain to them the purpose of this and how we can improve it. But the lightweight factor, all of that kind of remains across all of our materials, which is really great.
Well, only from a specifying perspective, I think it's interesting. And sorry, this slightly jumps, I think, to another question you're going to ask. But for us, we can offer all these options, and it's fantastic to have things like the Volar Bio, which we've specified a lot. Where we have the ability to, because we're not in control as the manufacturer. But that's sort of the point, really. A lot of this does need to be led by the end client, because they're the ones that make the decisions. So we can offer these options, and we can promote them, and our team have regular training in fabrics, every 6 months, so that we know the latest product that people like Ultrafabrics are bringing out. But if the client doesn't choose to use them, there's not much we can do about that. So that's where it's interesting. There's more of these conversations happening, because the end client is starting to now become a lot more aware, and people like TP Bennett, who have their own sustainability teams, and you've probably been doing that for absolute years. But now the client cares about that, whereas I don't know if that's fair to say, they probably maybe even 5 years ago, it wasn't top of the brief.
Yeah, you're quite right.
What are some of your requirements when looking for sustainable materials in your different projects and designs?
So for us at TP Bennett, we look at sustainability in 4 different areas. So environment, health and wellness, inclusivity and equity, and social value. And so for us, a sustainable material is not sustainable, even if it's 100% recycled content, if it's been made using forced labor in another country. So really we kind of see it as a holistic approach to sustainability. But obviously, taking in what everyone's been saying here about minimizing waste, maximizing renewables, maximizing that circular economy, and understanding what happens to products at the end of their life cycle are probably the key areas that we really focus in on, and making sure that they're coming from sustainable sources in the first place, if they're natural based, or also looking into the manufacturing facilities of the suppliers as well. It's really a whole holistic approach, and I think you can't extract one single element from it and just focus in on that. And I think that's where, not greenwashing, but maybe using sustainability as a marketing tool, it has become quite dangerous, because it's very easy to kind of use the color green and say, here's our eco chair or something, and when you look into it, okay, it's got 20% recycled content or something, but who knows where it's been made, who knows who's made it. So yeah, it's really having that holistic approach.
I think, you're quite right. That's exactly how we approach things as well. I mean, the design team, when looking for new materials and when we're looking at sort of standards, whether it be fabrics or finishes to be promoting to our clients, it has to be that all-round approach. As you've said, it can't just be the fact that there's one element in that product that ticks a certain box. So we need to look at, well, how far has that material traveled? How was it made? How much energy went into producing it? Because it might be 100% recycled, as you say, but if it's taken twice the amount of energy to produce as something else, that might not be the best choice. It may still be the best choice, but you need to look at the whole package. And that's, again, we struggle a little bit when the end user is wanting to tick one box, and that box might be, we're just looking at carbon footprint. Okay, that's a great thing to be looking at, but if it's just that, you're not looking at how much water has been used, how much energy, you haven't been looking at the whole picture. So we struggle a bit with that, because every client's different, obviously, and therefore you have to almost curate a package for each client, whereas we as a business want to be ticking all of those boxes. We want to be looking at all of that, and we do look at all of that. We're not perfect at everything. There's always continuous improvement to be done, but it's very difficult, as you say, to be then holistic and looking at all those things when you're then, your response is, well, but we only care about that one out of the sort of list of 100, and you think, okay, well, I'm not quite sure where to go from there, It's the client's always right, so.
Yeah.
I would add that price is quite an important aspect of anything, whether we're buying something or selling something. And what strikes me is how organic, fair trade, nice products are much more expensive at the moment. And the question arises, but non-sustainable, non-organic products that came into this life, into an existence, harming the nature, with lots of unhappiness in humans, but no one is paying that price. And therefore, I think it would be amazing if it would be other way around. Organic, fair trade, sustainable products should be cheaper. So therefore, the people, of course, go for more affordable pieces, and then that will drive the economy towards the more sustainable and organic products. Of course, it's quite right now sounds like a dream, but dreams we need to be dreamt in order to make them happen. So I do believe we will probably have a future where something is not sourced sustainably, irresponsibly, should be much more expensive, because they need to pay the price for whatever damage they caused on the way.
And I think it's also about giving more people better options to make better choices. And if we're not giving a lot of people these options, then I guess it's harder to create change. So, yeah. Is animal-free leather a more sustainable option? Can you share a little bit more about that? Yeah.
I mean, yeah, from an animal rights perspective, it is from an environmental perspective, because it is, carbon footprint. It's about a third of the carbon footprint. And then even in our case, because we're made in Japan, which is a cleaner energy grid than other Asian countries, there's that factor there. But I think the sustainability, like how you evolve that, I think just goes back to the resources and the application. So like in fashion, they're doing so many amazing things, mycelium leather, they're growing leather, pineapple. I mean, I think we hear about stuff every day, which is really great. However, those haven't been scaled up in a lot of cases. They're still kind of in development, or they're really specific for accessories or for things that don't need to be very durable. So I think overall, vegan leather just has to improve its resources where it can, and maybe going back to our comment too about having things that are built to last and you want to cherish, that kind of adds to that kind of overall concept of sustainability as well, where our material will, last longer than, your taste in the chair that it's upholstered in. So, yes.
I mean, I find this a really emotive and quite subjective topic, and it's one that we're asking the sustainability team quite a bit, like which one should we be specifying? Is it better to go natural and have animal leather, or is it better to go quite often petroleum-based or PVC-based, that's highly manufactured? And I guess I always kind of probably duck out of those questions, to be quite honest, because I do think it comes down to the individual. But I worked in high-end residential for 7 years that I know you're really familiar with as well. And I suppose the drawbacks of animal leather from a very practical, so I'm going to give a more practical kind of response, but is that hides have a lot of waste. The shape of the hide with a cow, you can't, it doesn't come out as a perfect rectangle. So you've got all of that product that's been processed and developed, that gets wasted. If there's a scar in the middle of the hide, then it will be rejected. If the cows had kind of fleas and things, then it will affect the quality of the hide. And then there's managing your client's expectations with regards to color, consistency, texture. If it's not the sample that you've shown them, certainly in high-end residential, they reject it. And so what happens to that hide? There's a whole host of factors that actually mean that it can, although has been a natural product and possibly sometimes a byproduct, it's not actually as sustainable as it could be, and we're actually generating a lot of waste. Whereas the animal-free leathers, you get it off a roll, so you can minimize the waste, you can get that consistency and color and texture and manage all the expectations, and then it's got all the kind of durability and maintenance aspects as well. So yeah, I sit on the fence.
I was actually having a conversation with my cab driver about this yesterday, because I told him what I did. So we were having a debate about it. But I think when you add to that as well the tanning process and the chemicals, and we're talking about well-being of employee and environment, that's a big part as well, where we don't have those same. So I confidently say yes now.
Take that on board when I'm asked it next.
Remember that conversation?
Yeah.
And are we seeing an increase in demand for animal-free leathers?
I think we are,
Yep.
certainly from the aspects that I've just mentioned, the
Yep.
durability side of things. Yeah, I think so. The other element that comes into it for us is the smell of leather. And we're doing a lot more work and research into designing for neurodivergence. And we know that the olfactory sense can be really overstimulating for some people and some users in the workplace, for example. So being able to remove those high smelling products such as leather can actually be of real benefit for some people. So that where we can reduce that, certainly we do. I'm in a bad position here.
From our seat, we definitely are seeing an increase. When we think about like our fashion side of the business, our automotive side of the business, there's a consumer demand for it now. So the need is there, where it may not necessarily always be there yet in contract or residential, but we are definitely seeing an increase. I think just with the younger generation, everything going on with this world and how we all just need to do better. There's a huge increase for sure.
hugely exciting. But the only thing I can add is that what we found is when you have such a good offering like Ultra Leather, where they have, I don't know if you know this, but they have fabrics where you can rub biro off. I mean, it's fantastic. So those sorts of selling points, it depends again on the client, because again, it's the client's choice as to, as you said, it's down to the individual. But when you've got those additional benefits of a fabric, it's for us as well as a sales team. Those are key things that we know that product is fantastic, and we know that it will last the same length that our chair will last, which is for us as well doubly, a win. So it's partly that we're pushing that more, but we're definitely seeing clients shifting to that. But obviously we have a mix because a lot of people look at fabrics for our furniture as well. So we're not only talking about leather. And
my final question is, what does sustainable design mean to you today? Which is quite
big one.
Question. Yes.
I'll take the hit. I'll go first.
Yeah.
I'll go. Yeah, we'll go along the line. So similar, I think, to a previous answer in that it is really sort of a loop for us. So it's looking at all elements within that loop in that circle of the process. So starting off with the materials we choose in the design process, looking at everything around that material. The longevity is a really big thing. I've just mentioned, we design our chairs to last for at least 10 years as a minimum. Realistically, they last 20 to 30 years on site, and then we reupholster them. So those materials are really important. Then it's the process. So again, as I mentioned earlier, in the design team will be looking at how is this chair made? How is every element of this chair made? How can we refine that? How can we improve every single part of it to be, and I agree with you, I don't like the word sustainable it has become a little bit of this buzzword, but just improvements is the word we like to use. Continuous improvement, every little step of the process. So yeah, the materials, the process, then how that's going to be used. So durability, longevity, we can't choose a material that is not going to stand the test of time. So all of those things come into our design process, and it's interesting when we take on new designers into our design team. Often people think of designing furniture as just drawing beautiful chairs, and you quickly realise that that's about 2% of the job, I think, and actually the main part of that job is understanding our full manufacturing process. How do we make every single element of that chair? How can you be a better designer by refining the design so that the efficiencies in production improve? And that for us then ties in with how we run our factory, which is that we use lean manufacturing methods. And I won't bore you with the full detail of what that is, but effectively it's around minimizing waste, and it's all types of waste. A key one for us is time. The longer you take to make a product, especially when we're manufacturing in the UK, the greater the cost. And energy and all the things I mentioned before. And all of those small improvements at the end of the day come out with a chair at the other end that is at a better price point and has been more efficiently made for the client. So that's then a benefit for that client who is procuring that product. So it's a long-winded way of answering about sustainable design, but for us it's every single element of that process, and you can't really just handpick one, you have to look at the whole picture.
I think I've got quite a boring response after all. That was really good. I know, yeah, we should have finished with that. Yeah, what she said. I think for me, it's quite simply designing with a conscience, understanding that everything that we design, that we put into an interior, that we work with has an impact on people and on the planet. And the more we can think about exactly what we're putting in, is we know that that's going to help or hinder people and planet. So I think I'll keep it short and sweet, if that's okay.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Tick, tick, tick. So I guess, as I mentioned before, everyone's sustainability is different depending on the industry. For me, of course, cashmere industry. And as we said, sustainability is becoming this word which is a little bit... So we started using the word responsibly sourced, which is more relevant, I would say. So for me, responsibly sourced design starts with people, and for me, of course, starts with our nomads, because only happy and fulfilled, inspired nomads can take care of the land so that it doesn't get desertified. So we really work very closely with our nomads to really have a strong relationship and share with them stories of our customers, what we're up to. Oh, it's raining in London, what's happening in Mongolia. So it's really, they feel connected with the world and where the products are going as well, not just in terms of paying them really good prices for sustainably sourced cashmere, but also involving them in the whole journey, because that human aspect is so important. And on the other hand, to really spread the word and give access to information to consumers, which is so important, which is the other end of sustainability. Only people who have access to information can make their decision, right? Because it's difficult to say, oh, no one's buying responsibly sourced organic cashmere because it's more expensive. But people need to have an access information. So we're trying to facilitate that. So on both ends, because that's what drives human aspect is so important, because very often when people talk about sustainability, it's all about, is this material sustainable? But we sometimes forget to talk about social dynamics of sustainability, which is so important. So I would add that.
So I would, yeah, of course, everything touches on that, but I mean, I think sustainable design is just, design period at this point. It's all about how can we approach it and what's our value. I read recently that the commercial interiors industry, the designers there can impact global emissions by like 10%, which, no pressure or anything, but I think it's really interesting, like the little tweaks we can make and how that can affect something. And then I think you're right about just having materials out there and giving them the option and being willing to take the risk, and knowing that, it will come eventually, and approaching it holistically.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for joining us today.